Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
The Godfather Part 3 wasn't just the controversial conclusion to cinema's greatest trilogy. It was a production haunted by ghosts, sabotaged by circumstances, and rebuilt from the ashes of what could have been Francis Ford Coppola's masterpiece. This is the story of 20 weird facts about The Godfather Part 3, plus one bonus revelation that changes everything you thought you knew about Michael Corleone's final confession. Let's dive in. Francis Ford Coppola never wanted to make this movie. Coppola spent 12 years saying no, not months, not a casual decline. 12 years of Paramount executives begging, pleading, and eventually threatening the filmmaker who'd given them two masterpieces. The director was drowning in debt from his passion projects. His electronic cinema studio Zoetrope was collapsing. He'd lost millions on films critics praised but audiences ignored. Paramount knew this. They weaponized it. The studio offered him $6 million to direct, plus complete creative control, on paper. But there was a catch. They needed the film in theaters by Christmas 1990, giving Coppola just 1 year to write, cast, shoot, and edit an epic conclusion to the most acclaimed trilogy in cinema history. He took the deal not because he had a story to tell, but because he had no choice. Art born from financial desperation rarely works. This film proved the rule. Robert Duvall walked away over money and never looked back. Tom Hagen's absence isn't a creative choice, it's a scar. Robert Duvall wanted the same salary as Al Pacino, $1 million. Paramount refused. They offered him half. Duvall, who'd helped define the Corleone family's moral center across two films, said no, and meant it. Coppola begged him to reconsider. Pacino called personally. Duvall wouldn't budge on principle. If Pacino's worth $1 million, so is he. The studio never blinked. So Coppola rewrote the entire script in weeks, replacing Hagen with George Hamilton's B.J. Harrison, a character nobody remembers. The film's emotional architecture collapsed without Duvall. Michael had no conscience, no connection to his father's original world. Critics noticed. The absence screams in every scene where Michael needed guidance but found only yes men. Duvall maintains he made the right choice. He's never once expressed regret. Sofia Coppola was hired days before filming started. Winona Ryder was Mary Corleone. Contracts signed, costumes fitted, table reads completed. Then, 10 days before production began in Rome, Ryder collapsed from exhaustion. Her agent called Coppola with the news she couldn't do it. Panic doesn't describe what happened next. The entire film's emotional core, Michael's relationship with his daughter, required reshooting in days. Coppola auditioned dozens of actresses. Nobody clicked. In desperation, he asked his daughter Sofia, then 18 and studying art at college, to step in temporarily. She said yes to help her father. That temporary decision became permanent. Sofia had acted as a baby in the first film, playing the infant during the baptism massacre. Now she was the lead female role. She had no formal training, no time to prepare, no understanding of the pressure waiting. The decision would haunt both Coppolas for decades. Al Pacino didn't want to work with Winona Ryder. Anyway, what Paramount never revealed, Pacino had doubts about Ryder from the beginning. He thought she looked too young, too contemporary. He couldn't see Michael Corleone's daughter in her face. During table reads, he felt no chemistry, but the studio loved her name value. They pushed hard. When Ryder left the production, Pacino felt relieved until he learned Sofia Coppola would replace her. Then he felt terrified for different reasons. He knew the nepotism accusations would come. He knew critics would savage her. He tried to protect her on set, running lines endlessly, keeping his performance gentle. But he couldn't protect her from what came after. In interviews years later, Pacino admits he wishes they'd delayed the film 6 months to find the right actress. The studio wouldn't wait. Christmas 1990 was non-negotiable. Money dictated art. The Vatican actually helped make this movie. Coppola needed to film inside Vatican City. This requires approval from the Pope himself. The script portrayed Vatican banking scandals, corruption, and murder. Not exactly the image the Catholic Church wants projected, yet somehow Coppola got permission. How? He met personally with Vatican officials, sharing his vision of Michael Corleone seeking redemption through the church. He emphasized the film's spiritual journey. A man trying to buy his way to heaven, learning salvation doesn't work that way. The Vatican saw an opportunity to show institutional critique alongside individual faith. They granted access to locations never filmed before. Coppola shot scenes in actual Vatican courtyards with Swiss guards as extras. The irony cuts deep. The church helped create a film exposing its darkest financial secrets because the director framed it as a redemption story. Art and propaganda occupy neighboring rooms. The helicopter attack was so realistic. People thought it was real. That Atlantic City boardwalk massacre wasn't CGI. Coppola hired real helicopters, real stunt coordinators, and real firearms loaded with blanks. The sequence required 50 takes over 6 days. Stunt performers dangled from cables, while M60 machine guns fired blanks 6 feet from their bodies. The sound design was so precise that test audiences covered their ears. But the real problem came during editing. When Coppola screened the sequence, audience members became physically ill. Some left the theater. Others complained it looked too much like actual violence they'd seen on news footage. Coppola realized he'd crossed a line. He pulled back the sound mix, softened the visuals. The final version you see is 30% less intense than his first cut. That restrained version still traumatized viewers. Critics called it gratuitous. Coppola called it honest. Andy Garcia learned Sicilian opera in 6 weeks. Vincent Mancini had to perform actual operatic scenes for the film's climax. Garcia had never sung opera. He had 6 weeks before filming in Italy. Coppola hired professional voice coaches who worked with Garcia 8 hours daily. They taught him not just the notes, but the emotion behind each phrase of Cavalleria Rusticana. Garcia lost 15 pounds from stress. His voice went hoarse multiple times, but he pushed through because he understood this role could make his career. And it did. His performance earned an Oscar nomination, the only acting nomination the film received. Garcia later said, "Learning opera was harder than any physical stunt he'd ever performed." The dedication shows. When Vincent watches the opera, you see an actor who understands what he's witnessing. That authenticity grounds the film's operatic violence. Garcia embodied Coppola's vision completely. Coppola wanted Julia Roberts, not Sophia. After Ryder left, Coppola's first call went to Julia Roberts. She'd just exploded with Pretty Woman months earlier. Roberts read the script and seriously considered it. She met with Pacino. They tested chemistry. Then Roberts looked at the production schedule, 60 days of filming across 3 countries with no breaks, and declined. She'd been working nonstop for 2 years and needed rest. Coppola then pursued Madonna, who wanted the role desperately. But Pacino vetoed her immediately. He thought her celebrity would overshadow the character. Bridget Fonda auditioned. Laura San Giacomo came close. Annabella Sciorra tested. Nobody fit Coppola's vision fast enough. The clock kept ticking. Finally, Sophia said yes, and Coppola ran out of time to find alternatives. He's admitted in interviews this was a mistake. Sophia has said she should have said no, but families make sacrifices nobody else would make. The film's original ending was even darker. Michael didn't die on that Sicilian terrace in Coppola's first draft. He lived completely alone, forgotten by his family, rotting in his compound. The final image showed him as a ghost haunting his own empire, too weak to walk but too guilty to pass. Coppola shot this ending. Then test audiences revolted. They called it depressing, nihilistic, unwatchable. Paramount demanded changes. Coppola fought them. The studio threatened to recut the film without him. So Coppola wrote the death scene, Michael dying alone, remembering dancing with his first wife decades earlier. That image of the orange rolling from his hand became iconic. But it wasn't the ending Coppola wanted. He wanted audiences to feel Michael's damnation viscerally. The studio wanted closure. Coppola gave them closure but never forgave himself. In his 2020 re-edit, The Godfather Coda, he restored elements of his darker vision. The budget exploded from $44 million to over $60 million. Paramount approved $44 million, or a massive budget for 1990. But Coppola's ambition, plus compressed schedules, equal disaster. Filming in Rome, Sicily, New York, and Atlantic City simultaneously required multiple units, duplicate crews, and constant travel. When Winona left, reshoots added millions. Coppola demanded hundreds of extras for crowd scenes. The opera sequence alone cost $7 million, while it's more than some entire films that year. Paramount executives flew to set weekly, demanding cuts. Coppola ignored them. The studio considered pulling funding mid-production, but they were trapped. They'd already spent too much to abandon the film. Buy wrap costs hit $60 million. Marketing added another $30 million. The film needed to gross $200 million just to break even. It made $136 million worldwide, profitable but disappointing. Paramount never forgave Coppola for the overages. Go ahead and like and subscribe because we're about to get into the truly wild territory, the stuff that almost destroyed careers and changed how Hollywood makes sequels forever. Sofia Coppola faced the most brutal reviews of any actress ever. Critics didn't just pan Sofia's performance, they annihilated her personally. The Washington Post called her a black hole on screen. Variety wrote she single-handedly cripples the film. Roger Ebert, usually kind, said she lacked the presence necessary for such an important role. The Los Angeles Times suggested she never act again. These weren't professional critiques. They were personal attacks on an 18-year-old who'd agreed to help her father in an emergency. Sofia attended the premiere in New York, sat through the screening, then fled the after-party crying. She locked herself in her hotel room for days. The reviews traumatized her so deeply, she didn't act again for over a decade, but they also transformed her. She channeled that pain into filmmaking, directing The Virgin Suicides, Lost in Translation, and Marie Antoinette. She became the first American woman to win Best Director at Cannes. The critics who destroyed her in 1990 now worship her. She's never publicly forgiven them. Al Pacino wanted to play Michael as fully corrupted. Pacino read Coppola's script and disagreed with its entire premise. He didn't believe Michael Corleone wanted redemption. He thought Michael had become exactly what he feared in the first film, his father. Pacino wanted to play Michael as irredeemable, beyond salvation, actively choosing evil. Coppola wanted the opposite, a man desperately seeking forgiveness he can't earn. They fought constantly on set. Pacino would play scenes cold and dead inside. Coppola would demand vulnerability and regret. The tension escalates throughout the film because Pacino gradually surrenders to Coppola's vision. Watch Michael's confession scene. That's Pacino finally embracing Coppola's interpretation. But earlier scenes show the conflict. Michael seems simultaneously repentant and monstrous because two artists were wrestling for the character's soul. That dissonance confuses audiences. Some call it brilliant ambiguity. Others call it inconsistent characterization. Both are right. The real Vatican banking scandal happened while they were filming. Art predicted life with eerie precision. Coppola based the Vatican banking plot on real scandals from the 1980s involving Archbishop Paul Marcinkus and the Banco Ambrosiano collapse. But while filming in 1990, new Vatican financial controversies erupted. Italian prosecutors investigated similar schemes Coppola depicted. Journalists noticed the parallels and descended on the set. The Vatican suddenly wanted nothing to do with the production. They revoked some location permits. Swiss guards who'd been friendly became hostile. Coppola had to move scenes planned for Vatican locations to recreated sets. The controversy gave the film unexpected publicity, but also validated Coppola's darkest accusations. The Vatican never officially commented on the film's depictions. Their silence spoke volumes. When art mirrors reality, this precisely, institutions get nervous. Diane Keaton returned only because Coppola begged. Kay Adams had walked away from Michael at the end of Part 2. Keaton had walked away from the franchise emotionally, too. She'd won an Oscar by then. She was Hollywood royalty. She didn't need this film. When Coppola called, she said no immediately. He called again. And again. He sent her flowers. He wrote letters explaining how Kay's presence gave Michael's redemption arc emotional weight. Finally, Keaton agreed to 3 weeks of shooting, not the full schedule. She appears in only 4 scenes, but those scenes carry devastating power. Her contempt for Michael feels earned, because Keaton brought 15 years of distance to the role. She looks at Pacino like he's a stranger who destroyed her life. That's not acting. That's Keaton channeling genuine ambivalence about returning to a role she'd outgrown. Her limited presence makes her scenes more impactful. The film was originally called The Death of Michael Corleone. That title told you exactly where the story ended. Coppola wanted audiences entering theaters knowing Michael would die. The journey would be watching how and why. Paramount hated it. Marketing executives argued nobody would see a movie announcing its protagonist's death in the title. They demanded The Godfather Part 3. Coppola fought for months. The studio threatened his creative control clause. He surrendered, but he never forgave them. For 30 years, he maintained the wrong title, damaged the film's reception. In 2020, Paramount finally let him retitle his re-edit, The Godfather Coda, The Death of Michael Corleone. Coppola recut the opening, shortened the runtime, and adjusted pacing. Critics called it an improvement. Not a masterpiece, but more coherent. Coppola proved his point. The title mattered. It framed audience expectations. Part 3. Promised more of the same. Death of Michael Corleone promised conclusion. Joe Mantegna almost walked off set over script changes. Joey Zasa was supposed to be a major character. Mantegna signed for substantial screen time depicting the vulgar new generation of mafia bosses. Then Coppola started cutting scenes daily. The Zasa storyline shrank. Mantegna confronted Coppola, threatening to leave. Coppola explained the film was getting too long. Something had to go. Zasa became collateral damage. Mantegna stayed but felt betrayed. His character now seems underdeveloped, a cartoon villain rather than a legitimate threat. Critics noticed. They called Zasa one-dimensional. Mantegna knew why. An hour of character development ended up on the cutting room floor. He's never worked with Coppola again. The director has never apologized. When filmmakers face impossible schedules, actors suffer. Mantegna learned that lesson painfully. The Sicilian filming nearly killed multiple crew members. Sicily in summer reaches brutal temperatures, add period costumes, heavy equipment, and 14-hour days. 3 crew members collapsed from heat exhaustion during the opera sequence. One technician suffered a heart attack and survived only because a medic happened to be on set. The production company flew in additional medical staff. They set up cooling stations every 50 feet. They started filming at dawn to avoid peak heat. But Coppola's schedule required interior and exterior scenes at all hours. The Sicilian locals warned him, August in Palermo is dangerous. Coppola pushed forward anyway. Actors fainted between takes. Extras quit daily. The local unions threatened to shut down production unless conditions improved. Paramount finally forced Coppola to add rest days. The schedule extended. Costs increased, but people stopped collapsing. Safety shouldn't be negotiable, but in Hollywood's rush for Christmas releases, it becomes a luxury. The film's violence was toned down from Coppola's vision. Every major violent sequence in the film exists in a more graphic version. Coppola shot the helicopter massacre with explicit squib hits and blood spray. He filmed the Opera House assassination with visible bullet impacts on the Archbishop's body. He captured Mary's death with forensic precision. Test audiences called these cuts unwatchable. The MPAA threatened an NC-17 rating, which would kill the film's commercial prospects. Paramount demanded cuts. Coppola edited out gallons of blood, shortened death sequences, and obscured graphic details. The theatrical version is PG-13 appropriate. His original cut was approaching horror film territory. Coppola believes the graphic violence was essential. It showed the consequences of Michael's choices viscerally. Audiences needed to feel the weight of death. Paramount believed audiences needed to feel comfortable buying popcorn. Commerce won again. Talia Shire threatened to leave. If her role was cut further, Connie Corleone transforms from abuse victim to family enforcer across 3 films. Shire considered it her greatest role. Then she read Coppola's script for Part 3 and discovered Connie appeared in only 6 scenes. She called Coppola furious. She'd been there since the beginning. She deserved more. Coppola explained he was focusing on Michael and Vincent. Connie had no arc left. Shire disagreed violently. She threatened to walk unless he expanded her role. So Coppola added the scene where Connie reveals she's become the family's cold-blooded enforcer. That moment, Connie handing Vincent the poisoned cannoli, became her most memorable action in the trilogy. Shire fought for it personally. Without her intervention, Connie would have been window dressing. Sometimes actors save themselves from their director's limited vision. The film's release was delayed multiple times. Despite Paramount's deadline, Paramount demanded Christmas 1990. They marketed it aggressively. They booked theaters nationwide. Then December approached and Coppola wasn't finished editing. The studio panicked. They threatened to take the footage and finish it themselves. Coppola worked 18-hour days for 6 weeks straight. His editor collapsed from exhaustion and had to be hospitalized. Coppola brought in backup editors. They finished December 20th. The film premiered December 25th, 1990. Coppola missed his own premiere. He was still doing final sound mixing. By the time he watched it with audiences, he knew it wasn't finished. He'd been forced to deliver an incomplete film. That knowledge tortured him for 30 years. The 2020 re-edit finally let him finish what he started. But by then, the film's reputation was set. You don't get second chances to make first impressions. Bonus fact, Michael's scream after Mary dies, that raw, animalistic howl of grief, wasn't in the script. Coppola wanted Pacino to collapse crying, but when cameras rolled, something broke inside Pacino. He channeled every loss, every regret, every consequence of Michael's choices into one sound. That scream lasted 7 seconds. It felt like minutes. The crew stood frozen. Some started crying. Sofia Coppola, lying dead in the scene, later said she'd never been more frightened in her life. Pacino's pain felt real. When Coppola called cut, nobody moved. Pacino stayed in character, rocking back and forth, tears streaming down his face. It took 10 minutes for him to recover. The crew gave him space. That take made the final film completely unedited. It's the most devastating moment in the trilogy, and it came from pure actor instinct. Pacino gave Coppola the emotional climax the film desperately needed. One unscripted moment justified the entire troubled production. If you enjoyed these revelations, like and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes secrets from cinema's most troubled productions, because the best stories happen when everything goes wrong. Just when you thought you knew everything about the Corleones, there's always one more secret.